As announced at E3 2021, A Plague Tale Innocence is getting a sequel, titled A Plague Tale Requiem. And though I had heard good things about A Plague Tale Innocence, I'd never gotten around to actually playing it myself, and so with the announcement of this sequel, I thought, what better time to give this game a go than now? And so I fired the game up and streamed it over on Twitch, and over the course of 2 days, I played through the entire thing because I did not expect this game to blow me away in the way that it did. I went into A Plague Tale Innocence curious about what this franchise is about, and I came out thoroughly excited for A Plague Tale Requiem. This video may seem a touch out of nowhere, but I wanted to share my awe at this masterpiece of storytelling, because to me, that's exactly what this game deserves. A Plague Tale Innocence was published by Focus Home Interactive, a publisher of some repute as to not be too eye-catching at first. However, the development for this game fell to Asobo Studio. I want to call them Asbo Studios from here on out because the thought of Yobos kicking off and making games just makes me smile, but I'll do my best to refrain. Interestingly, Asbo Studio... that didn't take long, did it? Asobo Studios have worked on many games such as Super Farm, whatever that is, and whatever that is. Looking at them, the only things they have in common is that I've never heard of them. They also functioned as extra studios working on games for Ubisoft, what's now known as Xbox Game Studios, and THQ, such as for bangers like Ratatouille the game. Hi, is this Asobo Studios speaking? Can I purchase your entire stock? The point being, this studio hadn't helmed development on many games, and the ones that it was the primary developer on, at least as far as my research tells me, were a long time ago. My point being, on paper, A Plague Tale Innocence was quite the hefty undertaking by the French studio. When the game released in May of 2019, it had been 10 years since Asobo Studios last released an original title, and yet despite that, the end quality was a game that simply nobody expected. As the title suggests, A Plague Tale Innocence's best feature is its narrative. The game is set in France during the mid-14th century, where we play as Amicia de Rune and navigate the destruction of the Black Death. The game begins quite peacefully, with Amicia out hunting with her father and her dog, Leon. He's the best boy, he is. And nothing seems to be amiss. It seems to be just another day in the Middle Ages, and while you get the impression that life is far from perfect, it's good. However, of course, when the game gives you a dog from the very beginning, you start to feel this anxiety at the pit of your stomach that simply makes you think, fuck. A fear that's quickly realised when your dog is literally eaten by the ground. It's all fun and games until you realise you can't John Wick soil. Little does Amicia know that this is a dawn of a grander adventure for her. I wouldn't call it a coming-of-age story necessarily. This game doesn't really do too much with tropes, but it certainly is quite a hefty ride. So what happened? The plague has come, hence why the ground ate the dog, because that's all the explanation you'll ever need, and Amicia returns home to speak with her mother, who is looking after her younger brother, who she barely sees. However, there's no time for Amicia's mother to explain Hugo's significance, because a big scary man shows up and he's looking for Hugo. Naturally, he kills Amicia's dad because you shouldn't have let the ground eat the dog, you dick. And because the Inquisition's now showed up to look for Hugo, they've got to abscond from the premises. This is where we're introduced to how the game wants you to play it, stealthily. Later on in the game there's a bit more leeway for detection, but here in the opening it's very much so a don't get seen. However, for the most part it's on rails. Doesn't mean it's not necessarily tense. There's a huge narrative weight to this as we see Amicia's entire household being put to the sword one by one, giving you the incentive you need to avoid being seen. Sneaking out through the house as it's slowly being turned upside down by soldiers looking for this little child. What did he do? Jesus, they really want him. And just as we open the back door to escape, we're found by one of the Inquisition's soldiers. But Amicia's mother really doesn't fuck around, so we're sweet. I was surprised there was no "Jesus Christ, mother, you just committed a capital offence," but hey, I guess that's just medieval life. And now we've got to escape the grounds with Amicia's mother, but events don't transpire so smoothly, and Amicia's mother is seemingly impaled by a big sword. And now Amicia and Hugo are on their own, running away with arrows flying at them, being chased down by soldiers in the dead of the night, or maybe it's just a really foggy day. I'm not too sure. While some mysterious force kicks off and handles a few soldiers in the woods, allowing the siblings just a little bit of time to escape. This begins the main character dynamic of the entire story, that being the bond between Hugo and Amicia. Amicia's last instruction from her now presumed dead mother is to protect Hugo and unravel his significance and how it relates to the plague. But more importantly, we see in effect the development of a bond between Amicia and Hugo. They may be siblings, but it's established pretty early on that they have had limited interactions with one another up until this point, and so their bond is developed in their survival instincts. That being said, Hugo is quite a young child, and so it's difficult for him to understand certain things, which complicates Amicia's life a little bit, but provides an authentic sibling dynamic. They don't always understand each other or see eye to eye, and it creates a couple of predicaments that play into the overall narrative. It's the bond of these characters that really sells A Plague Tale: Innocence as a narrative though, and I'm not necessarily just on about the bond between Amicia and Hugo. On this journey, if you will, we come across several characters: Lucas, Melly, Arthur, and Roderick. Each of these characters you meet are unique and interesting, and all have a purpose for being present and a reason to not move on. The game lightly shows the development of the bond between each of these characters in a way that doesn't take up simply far too much time, as that would have defocused the main story. To avoid being here for too long, I want to get onto the part that blew me away the most while playing through this game. It's not the well-established characters or the well-written narrative, they're great, but the thing that really sold me on this story is the atmosphere. Firstly, let's talk about the environmental storytelling. As you progress through the story, the places you find yourself in become more and more ravaged by the ongoing plague. At the beginning, you're at this beautiful, warm-feeling French chateau and its surrounding lands. But later on in the story, you return here to find that it's been completely overrun and infested by rats and is in ruins. Every corridor is dark and it feels kind of cold. You can clearly tell that this place was once inhabited by somebody, but it's hard to imagine the beginning of the game. It just goes to show the extent of destruction the plague is causing in the world around Amicia and the other characters. As you go through the story, this destruction becomes more and more apparent, giving the impression of the passage of time as well as the destruction of the plague. I'm trying to avoid the word pandemic. I don't want to give anyone PTSD. Furthermore, the soundtrack is subtle but brilliant. At every moment it perfectly captures what's going on, whether that be a moment with emotional weight or a moment in which there's a sense of urgency. The soundtrack conveys danger and helps indicate when it's over. You know what the game wants you to do almost based entirely on how the soundtrack is playing. If it's loud and intense, you need to run. If it's quiet but tense, then you're in stealth, but people are looking for you. If it's more peaceful, then you've got a brief reprieve in which you can just explore the area you're in. I don't think it was necessarily complicated or intended to be something groundbreaking, and it's not. It's just a really nice fitting soundtrack, and it perfectly complements what's visually being fed to the player. Another thing this story does really well is keeps the player asking questions, such as, why the fuck is there a ratnado? But perhaps the most important question the players will find themselves asking is, what is Hugo's significance to this plague? This is one of the most important questions asked of this plot in this game, and it delivers perfectly. I didn't find the answer to be generic and predictable, which I feel like is a very important thing when you've got this kind of mystery in a game like this. If the mystery is predictable, it's not much of a mystery, it's just a, right, when's that happening? I did guess close to what Hugo's significance actually was, but it wasn't bang on. Those little differences were imperative to keeping the plot interesting, because while you can guess what's going on sort of, you can't get a solid concrete idea based on things the game isn't feeding you, and so there's still a lot of little pieces to piece together, and their impact on the overall plot is huge. I love mysteries and storytelling, and in that regard, A Plague Tale: Innocence did deliver. Combine all these little things together and you've got a really tight narrative, one that I absolutely adored playing through, and one that I would more than happily play through again. And it's even more invigorating to know that this story is going to continue with A Plague Tale: Requiem, because while it would be a shame to overdo it, it would also be a shame to not do anything beyond this game at all. A quick Google of A Plague Tale: Innocence reveals that it's described as an action-adventure survival horror stealth game, but I don't feel like that accurately conveys what this game is. Horror, I guess, depends entirely on whether or not you're afraid of rats, but I personally wouldn't categorize it as such. Rats are cool. I think A Plague Tale: Innocence is best described as more of a stealth puzzle styled game. The primary emphasis on navigation is to keep it stealthy, to keep it quiet, avoid detection, but to also utilize environmental means to create distractions among other things, which gets more and more complex and diverse as you progress through the game and collect more tools to use to avoid being detected or to handle different enemy types. And like any well-crafted stealth gameplay system, this is almost a puzzle in itself. Enemies may have patrol routines that you need to be aware of. They may be wearing helmets, which makes them harder to kill. And they may be nearby to others, which you'll also have to weigh up in your options. As you progress through the game, Amicia becomes more and more proficient in stealth, but when you're detected you have a limited amount of time and resources at your disposal to be able to save yourself, and so realistically you want to avoid being seen. When facing human enemies, A Plague Tale: Innocence is almost certainly doubling down on its stealth aspect, but when it comes to navigating rats that will swarm and eat you, that's when it becomes more of a puzzle. You need to look around your environment and find means to avoid being eaten. The surest way is to be in the vicinity or carrying a source of light. Sometimes the game will put rats and human enemies in the same place and you can use them against each other, feeding the people to the rats and using that as a distraction to pass said rats. But even the rats get more and more complex the deeper you go into the story, so it's not always that straightforward, and it didn't take me long to figure out that the surest way to bypass human enemy archetypes is to kill literally everyone. Although sometimes that's exactly what the plot demands. And so no matter which way you play the game, Amicia de Rune becomes a cold-blooded murderer. It's okay, Hugo. They were fringe. The puzzle aspect does extend beyond the stealth as well. There are plenty of moments in the story where you have got to use your brain. There's not too many puzzles to the point where it becomes annoying, considering the stealth aspect of this game can be a puzzle in itself if you view it as such, but navigating enemies as a constant puzzle can also get tiresome, so it's good to have something that has you engage with the environment a lot. And keeping you engaged in what's going on is the primary focus of the gameplay, and it thrives in that aspect. Too many games are defocused at times and you will just zone out of what you're doing. In A Plague Tale: Innocence it's hard to do that because everything's so well focused. But I guess that could also be summed up as one of the more generally refreshing aspects of playing a game that isn't open world every now and then. A Plague Tale: Innocence persists the argument that there is still a place for more linear experiences, and I feel like that needs to be heard, especially in an industry where more and more games are finding themselves to be open world RPGs, even when that doesn't necessarily function right. This game knows what it is and exactly what it's trying to be. The gameplay reflects this. As a result of that, so does the player, and the experience is much more intimate and involved. The gameplay isn't without some minor jank issues. It's pretty smooth most of the time, but sometimes it doesn't necessarily feel like what you're intended to do works quite as well as it should. When in stealth, everything's running buttery smooth, but when you're in scenarios where you have to be detected and you're in a more head-on confrontation, it doesn't necessarily feel as smooth or robust. It's still solid gameplay, it's just a touch more jarring every now and then, but the main thing is that even in these moments, everything still feels doable, even if at times it feels like it's not necessarily designed for what you're doing and how you're doing it. The main thing here is there's nothing stupidly rough there, and when it comes to the boss fights where this is felt the most, you have to think of it again more so like a puzzle. Sometimes it doesn't feel like it behaves quite as smoothly as it should, but I suppose anticipating and adapting to that is a part of the challenge, and so overall this game's gameplay is robust, and that's the main thing. A Plague Tale: Innocence tells the story of one of the darkest chapters of human history. It's a survival tale of Amicia and her younger brother, one with many emotional twists and turns that kept me fully invested. This game is a masterfully told story, with excellent characters, brilliant environments, amazing soundtracks, and quality, fun, stealth-oriented gameplay, all condensed into a game that takes only around 8 hours to finish. This is a game that kept me so hooked that I finished it in 2 sittings. These days, that's rare. Altogether, this game was an absolute joy to play, and come the end, it left me with something that few games have managed to do in recent years. It left me with a big fat fucking stupid grin right across my face. To sum it all up, if you haven't played A Plague Tale: Innocence, then I recommend that you absolutely give it a go. If you like a storytelling game, then this is an absolute gem, and I simply cannot believe that I didn't get around to play this game sooner. But I'm glad that I did, because with A Plague Tale: Requiem now on the horizon, there's a game that I can add to my list of upcoming titles that I truly am excited for. I truly look forward to seeing what A Plague Tale has in store for us next, because it's games like this that remind me why I love gaming. It's that feeling of involvement in these high quality stories, and that satisfying feeling is completely priceless. Of course, that brings us to the end of this video, so thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Be sure to go ahead, leave a like, subscribe, share the channel with your friends and all that wonderful stuff. That would be super fantastic. And be sure to check out my Twitch channel where I do all my streaming. I really enjoy the atmosphere of the chats over there, and we're currently doing a New Game Plus playthrough of Ghost of Tsushima, so if that's something you're interested in, then be sure to go and check it out. Anyway, thank you all for watching, and with any luck I'll be seeing you all very soon with another video at some point. But until next time, take care and goodbye.
Mm-hmm.